It has begun. The great deporting. But we're going to talk about here in New York City. It's happening. It's very fascinating that people allow themselves to get emotionally manipulated if the emotional manipulation serves the purpose. Like, you have the tier of people who don't care. They want to pass rules that just makes themselves feel good, but they don't have to deal with any of the things, any of the blowbacks of these ideas. But then you have the people that, and they are everyday people, but they're everyday people that have been sold fear and haven't been sold this fear. Oh, nope, wrong
Apparently,
video. But haven't been sold this
we
fear.
went to bodega.
They legitimately believe oh, the U.S. should be like a state for everyone and should let everyone in and should make all the illegals legal, and just it's this idea of viewing nations as like economic zones, and anyone who's a migrant is moving from an economic zone with a bad transaction to an economic zone with a slightly better one. It's like they view them as like economic zones instead of like of nations, of communities, of the people they're in. And when you don't have this view of your country or your state or your community, again, it's like this citizen of the world type deal. It's something that, theater kids think about, but normal, average, everyday people only really care about the things that are happening around them, like their friends, their family, and, the things around their city. Like, if people are forced inside their house, cannot leave, they cannot work, they cannot make money, but they have to, you know, pay the taxes, pay the bills, or if all their taxpayer money is going to other places and inflation's rising, they're getting taxed more. The last thing they fucking care about is a migrant. Even if the migrant is 100% in the right and they don't commit any crimes outside of, uh, you know, crossing the border illegally, like people don't care because they don't care for the emotional manipulation that has been done in the past couple years to, forego, and in some cases, forego justice to legitimate criminals that have crossed the border because everyone wants to just lump them into the same category. So yeah, and this is the point. Like, people are so desensitized to these things. They're like, yeah, deport them. Like, the fuck they doing here? But let's give it a watch.
We went to bodegas in Washington Heights.
I remember, I remember these used to be like a dollar. Like, didn't they have the $1 thing was just on the label? Yeah, the Arizona, and now it's 3 fucking 50.
Then came over here to the Bronx. Less money coming in, employees not showing up are some of the things that we heard. But for others, President Trump's immigration crackdown means bringing law and order.
So, with President Trump's immigration crackdowns underway, certain areas of town are a lot quieter than they used to be, with local store owners revealing a notable decrease in the amount of customers they're seeing, while saying some of their employees are scared they could be spotted by ICE and deported if they come to work. However, New York is not the only city in America where immigration activity is creating ghost towns, and it certainly might not be the last.
Promises made, promises kept, with President Trump taking immediate action on his top campaign focus, fighting illegal immigration. And as ICE closes in on migrants, once vibrant neighborhoods are now turning into ghost towns.
Suslin Pichardo, who manages a Bronx bodega, says fewer undocumented workers are showing up for their shifts.
Yeah, and I feel like if you're a business and you're actively hiring illegals, like, you should pay a fine or be prosecuted. Because here's the thing, right? as an illegal immigrant, you hold no bargaining power in your employment. So what happens is they work them more hours. They pay them less because there's this thing called a quote unquote protection tax. That doesn't like exist. Like maybe they shoehorned that into the thing, the contract, right? Using Chat GPT. It doesn't exist. So you were being paying $7.50. Now you're being paid $5.25, and you're working more hours than just anyone else, like any like regular American citizen. Like if you were a company, a capitalistic company, like you would want illegal immigrants, or effectively this. Well, it's kind of a stretch, but effectively a slave class of people that, okay, they're not working for free, but they're working more hours, less money, and they have no bargaining power. And if they have a problem with that, well, then the company can hold the idea of the whole getting deported over their head. So yeah, I mean, this is clearly a loophole. And again, people refuse to look at things like these. Like everyone wants the illegals to come in, but no one wants to talk about how they're treated by the very companies that want them in so they can hire them. Then no one wants to talk about that.
Significantly less foot traffic. She calls it the 2025 pandemic, but this time an immigration pandemic.
There's a lot of criminals. Now streets is more safe. You can see, you can walk now.
Yeah, they'd be afraid.
Yeah, and again, you have all these like migrant gangs of people just walking around committing crimes, and because they're in sanctuary cities, yeah, they get arrested, but then they're released back because they have immigration status, and you can't do anything to them. And yeah, now that they're off the street, now you can fucking walk. And again, the people who push these sanctuary city laws, they don't have to deal with this. They probably live in gated communities with security all around them, surrounded by other people that are the same way. They don't have to walk the streets and have to deal with potential criminals and immigrant criminals coming out, like committing crimes. Because then only for them to get arrested, then to go back and do it again.
Be calling me and asking, Frank, are they gonna come to the store?
A lot of fear, says this man from Ecuador. It's the kind of fear humanitarians are pushing back on, especially those who wish to protect the sanctuary sentiment.
But the reality is 65% of Americans strongly support deporting immigrants convicted of violent crimes.
Yeah. I mean, I'm surprised it's 65 that in support. It should be more. But we're talking violent crimes. Like, yeah, they should be deported. Yeah.
Some bodega owners are looking to hire employees, in this case documented employees, because they need to keep moving the economy.
So immigration crackdowns are causing mainstream political panic, with some suggesting they'll lead to a smoothie shortage. But what nobody in the open borders crowd wants you to remember is that 4 years ago, before the largest migration event in U.S. history, we had a reasonably well-functioning country, which was a lot safer. Because it wasn't a hiding place for gang members and dangerous individuals, the very people Homeland Security is now after, with mass raids taking place in sanctuary cities all across the country. But these raids are turning certain New York neighborhoods into ghost towns, with business owners and residents saying the streets feel much quieter. But that brings up some uncomfortable questions and possibilities, like where did people living in the country without the right to work earn all of the money they were spending at these businesses? Were they earning money in a manner connected to the criminal underground by committing crimes, shoplifting, reselling stolen goods, or worse? And those
So we've already did a video on that, obviously. And if you're a company and you cannot operate legally and not at the expense of the consumer or other U.S. workers, if you cannot operate without going against them by hiring illegals, and having all these things where people's convenience are under threat because they have to deal with people stealing and nothing happening to them. If you can't do that, like, you just shouldn't exist as a company. Because you're effectively like the black market now. Every country has a level of crime, a criminal underworld, a level of crime that's going to happen. But to make things like stealing that in any other nation would be like, yeah, that's a crime. Just legalize it. It's like, who the fuck are these people in office? Are they the ones benefiting from this? Or are they just passing rules that make them feel good?
Businesses by complaining to the news that immigration raids have scared away their employees. They've just admitted to illegally hiring and employing people who can't legally work and may be in the country without permission. Which brings us to the real reason why certain parts of New York are turning into ghost towns by allowing over 400,000 people to live in this city without permission to be in the U.S. An entire economic system has been created which is illegal and exploits everyone who's part of it. In fact,
yeah, it's effectively like a third world country, but it's in your backyard. Like, we've seen it on, like, them selling things on the streets and having, like, shawls put up in the streets of things that have already been stolen from one company, and they're being sold at a markdown price. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you stole it for free and you're reselling it. I mean, and again, this is something that absolutely affects the community. Because these companies, they hire people, right? They have workers, and the people that are law abiding now has to be side by side with people stealing and committing crimes, and immigrants that are committing crimes. I mean, yeah, any normal, average, everyday individual would be like, what the fuck, man? Again, the past couple of years, you couldn't even point this the fuck out, because then you would be attacked. Or people would use emotional manipulation against you. And again, people have hardened their hearts to this. It's like, in the Bible, in the Old Testament, where God hardened the hearts of the Pharaoh, people act like he used fucking God magic, and it's like, no, this is like a mechanism that human beings employ. It's like, if you're going to keep beating people over the head with empathy and manipulation, they're going to be like, okay, I no longer care. Like, it's but the immigrants that want a new life don't care. They're illegal. Send them the fuck back. It's like that's just mechanism people, and again, it's what people voted for.
In fact, I spoke to one restaurant worker who said their boss was hiring newly arrived asylum seekers off the books for far below minimum wage so they could save money. On top of
And yeah, people like him should be, investigated. Like, yeah.
that, if you walk down the streets of our working class neighborhoods, you'll see unlicensed street vendors all over the place.
Yeah, see, this is what I'm talking about. I'm sorry to keep pausing, but this is ridiculous. This is like a third world nation, but it's here in America. Like,
sell products that still have the price tags on them from the stores they were stolen from, which get handed to them in suitcases by a group of men, making you wonder if some of the people spreading out items on blankets are there by choice or not. But as you're about to see, even though immigration raids are putting an end to an illegal system of exploitation, predatory businesses and immigration advocates are very upset about it. For some,
yeah, and I 100% believe that, effectively because again, there's hierarchies in every system, even in the criminal one, the criminal underworld, the black market. There's still a hierarchy. I won't be surprised if the criminal hierarchy is exploiting people who again are either young or average citizens into allowing this to either sell the product or fence the product, or provide transport for these things. Like, we don't know, but it's always to assume that this is the possibility and act off that. I mean, the migrants, the illegals, they've already committed one crime coming in here. Who's to say they won't commit another one? Like, I don't know if they will or not.
Some reason. So here we have your local bodegas, convenience stores, coffee shops, and restaurants. And in some parts of New York, businesses like these now complain that they've got staffing problems and customer problems at the exact same time. And they say it's because of a prevailing sense of fear in immigrant communities over recent Homeland Security activity. But if what these businesses say is true, and both the customers and employees at some of these places aren't supposed to be here, who exactly is benefiting from a system that is in violation of federal immigration law?
We went to bodegas in Washington Heights, then came over here to the Bronx. Less money coming in, employees not showing up are some of the things that we heard. But for Johan Mencias, ICE raids are already making a positive impact in our neighborhoods.
I know there's a lot of good people too, and I feel bad for them, but it's gotta be done. We gotta clean up.
Yeah, and again, that's a 100% fair point to have. It's like, yeah, it sucks. I mean, this is why I don't blame the immigrants. Like, if I was, like, I don't know, if I lived in Venezuela and I had a family and I could cross over the border to have a better life, like, I'd do that in a fucking heartbeat, right? That's why I don't blame the immigrant, but it's still illegal, right? But you know what? And again, are there people that's going to be caught in this crossfire that are innocent? Absolutely. But this is something that should have never have gotten to this point. Things transpire, like 100 things happened for it to get to this point, and now we're reaching critical mass, and people voted for things like this to get done. And it's just a wave you gotta ride. I mean, and again, I always say like it shouldn't have gotten to this point, but again, people advocated for this to happen. Well, not for this, but for the things to transpire to force people into hardening their hearts, to blocking out emotional manipulation, to voting Trump in office, to allow these things to happen. And again, people like to pretend these things, the emotional manipulation, the badgering, the going after people for having the wrong opinion. People like to pretend these never happen to average, everyday human beings that see problems and just express them. But, okay, you can pretend these things never happen, but it's like, okay, it's like we're never going to get anywhere in this argument then,
Got two daughters. I want my daughter.
Wow, so as it turns out, the residents of this neighborhood do not benefit from businesses who break the law and hire people who aren't supposed to be in the country. And they're saying their neighborhoods now feel a lot safer because of these recent immigration crackdowns. But even though residents seem to be happy now, local businesses that were hiring these folks are not. But the crazy thing about that is by hiring people who don't have a right to work and paying them less than fair wages, those workers are being exploited, and so is the local neighborhood, which now has less jobs available for its residents. And how do we know that these businesses hiring people with no legal right to be in the country aren't holding that status over them or using it to coerce them to come into work in the first place?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, assume this is the case because companies are not moral entities. Like, the point of the company is to just make money. Like, they're neither good nor bad. They will employ and yeah, companies are made by people, but it's your job to, if you're the higher up or in upper middle positions, to just make money. And again, if you can hire someone who's an immigrant, work them more, pay them less, I mean, why wouldn't you do it? And it's not technically illegal, like especially not in these sanctuary cities where immigrants are given protection, right? Like, of course you would do this.
possibly as leverage to get them to work in unsafe, unsanitary conditions or do things they wouldn't otherwise. But there's another problem, because in New York you've got over 400,000 people who don't have a legal right to remain in America. Yet because this is a sanctuary city, they're allowed to do that, but they've got to get by somehow. They've got to work, they've got to buy food, clothing, provide for themselves. And they can only do this if groups are willing to help them break the law, and some of those groups are gangs. And one of these gangs, this Tren de Aragua from Venezuela, they've had a bunch of high-profile members taken down recently. But this is a gang that made its way to New York during the asylum crisis, where it's been growing its criminal reach by exploiting people who may have entered the country but can't live or work here in a legal manner. And now...
Exactly. It's like, again, if you're on this bus, just an ordinary, unintelligent bloke, yeah, the gangs, these people with power and numbers and influence will exploit you too. Like, and who knows if they're not exploiting actual American citizens? I mean, the people putting these policies, like, they're already being emotionally exploited, or they're emotionally exploiting others into agreeing with this. But who's to say that, again, an immigrant who's probably still here illegal but have no ill intention, who's to think that they're not going to be coerced into committing crimes, into doing things against their judgment by criminals? Well, again, we don't know. That's why we shouldn't create this system for these things to happen.
Find themselves needing the help of criminals to get things like fake IDs or fake working papers, which they could be using to trick legitimate businesses into hiring them, revealing that even if companies don't knowingly hire people who aren't supposed to be here, they could still be forced to shut down if they do, which apparently might happen to some small businesses in certain parts of New York.
There's a lot of criminals. Now the streets is more safe. You can see, you can walk.
Susan Pichardo, who manages a Bronx bodega, says fewer undocumented workers are showing up for their shifts and significantly less foot traffic. She calls it the 2025 pandemic, but this time an immigration pandemic.
So the manager of this one bodega in the Bronx says that this crackdown has turned New York City into what it was in 2020 when the streets were completely empty and desolate. That's quite a statement. But it also reveals that most of the business at her store was due to illegal activity, both on the part of the employees and the customers. And it also means that her store might not be able to stay open if that illegal activity disappears. Now look, I'm a business owner myself, and a store shutting down is never something anybody should be excited about. But if you've got a business and all of the people working there aren't supposed to be in the country, and neither are the customers, who exactly is benefiting from that business other than the owners? And
yeah, like, you're creating this, like, fabricated system where you're hiring illegals to serve other illegals. Or maybe, like, even in your business, like, the people that, you know, the criminals are stealing from other businesses and giving to yours. Like, this entire parallel, well, like, what's a better word for this? Like, phantom system exists that, you know, once it starts getting cracked down on, that entire ecosystem just goes out the fucking window.
how are all of these customers who don't have legal work authorization able to afford the things in the store? They had to have been getting their money from somewhere, and these places are tiny. They can't employ 400,000 people, which means some of the business these stores were getting is related to criminal activity in other parts of the city. And there's no way around that. If somebody does not have legal work permission, the only way to get a job is to do it in an illegal way. And in some cases, that involves more than just working off the books. It involves shoplifting, which is a big problem in New York because retail theft has been decriminalized, and there are markets all over town where people were just reselling stuff on the sides of the street. On top of that, you've got restaurants full of health code violations renting themselves out to people to just use. And apparently you've got people making food and selling it all over town, totally under the radar of the health department. And the restaurant in question here did not have a satisfactory inspection grade like this place does. In fact, soon after this article came out, it ended up getting shut down, which means people eating that food could have gotten sick. And if people are buying food prepared in an unsafe, unlicensed restaurant, that just hurts legitimate businesses like this while making the streets of these neighborhoods much less safe.
We are victims of those criminals. Fernando Mateo says President Trump is making bodegas safer by doing what the criminal justice system has failed to do. Now,
exactly. I don't know if he's an immigrant or not, but he clearly has, you know, a different ethnicity. Like, this idea that just legal immigrants will defend illegal immigrants is idiotic. It's like they got here legally under, proper channels and they want to integrate, but the illegals clearly don't. Right? Like in some cases, they actively spite the system and the people around them. And people act surprised that, people want to vote to get this shit the fuck out of here.
If you've committed a crime, I recommend, other than enter the country illegally, that you look for another place to work. Because if they come looking for you...
So this guy right here, he's the president of the United Bodega Workers of America, and every time something happens in New York that's controversial involving a bodega, he's there to stick up for these people every time they get robbed, every time they get raided, every time criminals enter their stores and assault workers. And he says the stores he represents are victims of crime committed by people who aren't supposed to be here. And that's the problem that sanctuary cities have. They're okay with criminal activity as long as it's federal, but they don't seem to understand that by allowing one type of crime, they expose themselves to other types as well. And residents of the Bronx and Washington Heights can attest to this. They're out there saying that their streets were dangerous, all because illegal activity allowed and empowered a criminal element to dig in its heels and take over. And empowering criminals hurts the law abiding in ways that are less obvious but are very real for the people affected by.
Yeah, it hurts everyone. It hurts the law abiding. It hurts the system. It strains the system. It costs more money for the system. Like, decriminalizing criminal activity hurts everybody. But again, the people passing these, they don't have to see these things. They don't have to walk the streets and deal with the rules they put into action. They just pass rules that make themselves feel good, or make themselves, I guess, sleep at night. And maybe despite some invisible enemy that they have in their head, but they just don't look at like the effects of these. They don't have to deal with the effects of these things.
By them. And if jobs are being given away to people so businesses can break the law and save money, that's something we need to talk about, because it means that these businesses are taking job opportunities away from people who have to obtain them in a by-the-books manner.
Some bodega owners are looking to hire employees, in this case documented employees, because they need to keep moving the economy. In the Bronx, I'm Eliezer Marte.
So look at that. These businesses, now that their employees won't come to work, they've decided that they're going to obey the law and hire people who are on the books, which is going to be good news for people who need their first job and can't get it. And while the immigration activist crowd is out there protesting these raids as being cruel and unnecessary, these very same activists never protested businesses who exploited their workers at the expense of the law-abiding, who they wouldn't hire. However, the open borders crowd is very upset about this, and they've got no intention of staying quiet about it, even though it benefits the very people trying to make it in America, immigrants, who they claim they're advocating for.
Yeah, and again, these are people who've been emotionally manipulated, who've been sold this idea that, once you grow up and have to actually, you have responsibilities and a family and a job and other problems, like, it's like this facsimile just goes away, and you're like, okay, now I care about my family, my community, the people around me, and I can't be sold this lie or be manipulated in this way anymore. It's fucking theater kids with this idea. It's like, it's so annoying.
So as a sanctuary city, New York is in a very strange place. Yes, these ICE raids are getting dangerous individuals, criminals, gang members off our streets. But you've got an entire group of people here who are very proud of New York's sanctuary city status, probably because they don't understand how much harm it's doing. But nonetheless, these are people who are very upset that any of this activity here is taking place.
I don't know if they're ghost towns because just no one's there. I mean, people at work, like, now that the immigrants are off the street, someone probably didn't work because they're just giving money and just on the street selling stuff and living like Larry. But yeah, like people work and now, during the day they have jobs to go to. And I don't think they're ghost towns. I just think, people are just living their lives.
And they want it to stop.
Deportations undermine city families, they undermine city communities, and they undermine public safety. And so what our laws say is that the city is going to divorce itself from what it sees as misguided federal immigration enforcement efforts.
So this professor on the news describing this viewpoint of sanctuary city protections, maybe he holds it himself, maybe he doesn't, but the fact of the matter is, it's the working class neighborhoods that are experiencing most of the crime related to all of what we're talking about today. And none of the gang activity plaguing the Bronx or Washington Heights is present in places like Cobble Hill or the West Village. And these raids and crackdowns are something that people who live in these neighborhoods are very happy about.
Like, how the hell is it racism? Like, again, they're using the same tactic the evangelical Christians did in the past when they decried everything as satanic, right? Like, it's the same stupid fucking tactic that we've seen time and time again. Get the fucking hiccups. It's like, assuming that, the immigrants are, how do I say, it's just assuming them that they're just, the same as any other minority and homogenizing them. Like that in and of itself is racist. Because you have immigrants from all over the world that are legal that also don't want the illegals to, commit crimes, make the place unsafe. It's like, and again, this is the emotional blackmail being used right here, and the emotional labeling being used. And again, I just looked the fuck past it.
And while activists are out there talking about how terrible these raids are, none of the people who live in these neighborhoods are listening to them. And some of the people taken down in these raids are extremely dangerous. They've been caught trying to buy military-grade assault weapons. And this gang activity is certainly not a mystery to New York's leaders. They know that a lot of gang-related activity is taking place in shelters like the Randall's Island facility that is in the process of being shut down. You'll find wanted posters outside, and the city knows there are gang members living in these places, taking them over, co-opting them. But because this is a sanctuary city with a right to shelter, the city has plans right now to open a new 2,200 person shelter in the Bronx while all of this immigration related activity is taking place in that very same neighborhood.
Yeah, I think anyone that does this should be, maybe be, looked into, because again, they must either be benefiting from this in some way or actively trying to go against a system that people voted for, right?
Any of these immigrants that we speak about tonight have been properly screened.
Tough questions from Mayor Eric Adams' staff here at this contentious Bronx Community Board 1 meeting.
I'm living this. I'm seeing this.
Things got worse when the mayor's chief of staff revealed the decision to open a 2,200 bed.
So I can answer the first guy's question. It's a no. Nobody gets screened at all. The city's not doing background checks before it moves people into its shelters. That's how you've got gang members living down the hall in some cases from families with little kids. And
yeah, it's lying. It's like if you can't fight someone with legitimate arguments because the arguments are flawed, it's like, then yeah, I guess the best you can do is lie. I mean, and again, it's emotional lying. It's trying to maintain, I guess maybe you're getting paid to do this. Maybe you're an NGO allowing these things to happen because you're getting paid to have to sit on this board. But again, people are just sick and tired of the emotional manipulation. They're sick and tired of the lying. And I mean, yeah, that's just about it.
Since we're a sanctuary city with a right to shelter, that automatically means that nobody can be denied that right regardless of past or current criminal activity. That's how these dangerous gangs were able to make their way into these shelters in the first place. Nobody checked to see if they were thugs. And after this place opens, because this is a sanctuary city, the police will not be allowed inside it to keep it safe and make sure there aren't gang members operating openly with weapons. But by
Yeah, they're actively keeping the law out for some reason. It's like, yeah, I mean, I think they're like, I would treat these shelters the exact same way as the criminal immigrants. Like, I mean, I would do it, but will it be done? Who knows?
advocating for a halt to any immigration crackdowns in New York, these advocates fail to realize that they're advocating against protecting people who do have a valid reason to be here. Some of the asylum seekers in these shelters do have valid claims, but by allowing gang members and criminals to live next to them, everyone's in danger. And now things are so bad, criminal activity is spilling out of these shelters into our neighborhoods.
Yeah, and again, everyone loses. Like, okay, the person, like, can feel good, but everybody loses. I guess with the exception of the criminal, like, the community loses. People with valid asylum-seeking needs are losing. You know, the citizens losing. Like, you know, the communities lose. Like, everyone loses. Like, you lose money doing this. Like, you lose people because everyone who just looks at this will be like, this is idiotic. Well, except the emotionally manipulated individual who's been emotionally manipulated. Now they hope to emotionally manipulate others. It's like, yeah.
Gang members committing crime all over town and exploiting people. On top of that, New York does not have unlimited shelter space, which means that some of these facilities are housing gang members while people who could be legitimate asylum seekers are out sleeping in tents on the street somewhere.
A lot of fear, says this man from Ecuador. It's the kind of fear humanitarians are pushing back on, especially those who wish to protect the sanctuary sentiment.
We've been dealing with hysteria of mass deportation, of people feeling that any local law enforcement.
So this guy from Ecuador who partially showed his face on the news, is he here legally? Because if he is, he's got nothing to worry about. But if he thinks he's not here legally, he probably isn't, and he could be at risk for getting deported. But even though we've got advocates that are scaring people with this thought of mass deportations, when Trump took office, ICE only had around 6,000 agents who could even act in a deportation capacity. The resources simply are not there to deport millions of people from America. And even though ICE is now allowed to enter sensitive areas like schools, hospitals, churches, that's not what's happening. Federal agents are not camped up outside of an elementary school. Instead, the reason ghost towns are popping up in this city is because of targeted removals of people who are dangerous and also have orders of removal from this country and are here
Yeah, because when the immigrant, like the illegal immigrant that are, like, when a lot of them move in, like, for the most part, most, you know, people that are American citizens, it's not like they move out, but it's like, well, I guess if there are criminal gangs that are also entering the, like, these communities, like, obviously if you have a family, you know, you have children, and you know you have, like, you're going to move out of these places, and again they fill up with possible, well, I mean, illegal immigrants, some of them possible criminals. And it creates situations like what we've seen, where they're selling, like, shawls in the streets, like a third world nation, and it creates a situation where crime is being decriminalized, and it's like, who under, like, it's surprising people still live here, but a lot of this was never told, or people just didn't know, like, they would just hear something happening, and a lot of it was just actively withholding information from these communities. Well, now people are starting to know what the fuck happened in that past 4 years.
profiting at the expense of the law-abiding. What do you think about that? Are these raids in New York City having a positive effect on neighborhoods that were previously taken over by criminals? Are people in the country unlawfully forced to subject themselves to the criminal underworld in some fashion to get by? And does that empower and embolden people who put all of us in danger? Let me know. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.
Yeah, and yes to all those questions. Like, yeah, I mean, only you benefit. Like only the community benefits, only the people benefit. Yeah. How horrible being forced to hire American citizens and pay them an honest wage. Yeah, who the fuck would want to do that? This owns publicity, publicly complaining that their illegal workers not showing up should be intimidated, immediately investigated. IMO. My old man eyes are acting up. It's late. Yeah. Cheap labor is a word. Exploitation. Cheap labor is in a word exploitation. No matter how you want to try to justify it or rationalize it, it's nothing but a euphemism for exploitation. Yeah. Absolutely. Creating ghost towns should tell how bad illegal immigration has become. Absolutely. Again, if there is an entire block with illegal immigrants now being rounded up and moved out, like, I do believe there are some ghost blocks. Maybe they should employ legal American citizens and pay them a decent wage. Now, why the fuck would they do that? That friend was stuck being an Uber driver for the last 4 years. Couldn't find a job in construction. Last week, Monday, he walked into JB Construction and was given a job the same day. He just finished his first week of work. Trade in 4 years. I don't know what this has to do. Like, you're talking about it in New York? Huge. Had these people knowingly hired undocumented illegal immigrants mean they should be facing a hefty fucking fine, in my opinion. I do agree. We're saying that you can no longer abuse illegal employees and that you can no longer underpay them. Yeah, god damn it. Fuck. But anyway, I mean, the shit's going down. And I'm all for it. But anyway, that's all I gotta say about this. Peace.